Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm RJ Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower One, John F. Allen.
And I am RJ Sullivan, Tower 2.
Today, we're going to be running down our top 5 Christmas movies. We have a list, both RJ and I, and we are going to share them with you as to what movies we feel make our top 5 list and why, and discuss those movies and what they mean to us. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you as always. We're going to start with RJ. He's going to start with his first on his list. So I'll let you take over, RJ.
All right. Well, thanks, John. First of all, before I get started, we are recording this on December 13th, which happens to be John's 50th birthday. And so I just want to say real quick, thanks for having a working birthday and spending it with me. I'm honored by that. We have a tendency to be like, oh, this is a holiday, let's move on to another day and this and that. But I was excited about doing this episode, and John was too. And I'm privileged that you decided to go ahead and record this with me today.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, RJ. I appreciate that. I really do. And it's a pleasure to be here. And just to be honest with you or whatnot, this is a COVID birthday. So I wasn't really doing a whole lot in celebration anyway. So I figured, you know what? We both are excited about doing it. And I didn't have any plans. And it's a Sunday. And we can talk about some things that'll hopefully get others who listen to the show into a better frame of mind and better spirit, given the year that 2020 has been.
Whew, well, yeah, we need that. We need that badly. So, not everything on my list is all that big of a surprise, but, I keep it honest. These are movies that affected me. First off on my list, I figured let's just get it over with. Before one more thing, these are not in any particular order. I don't have a 5 to 1. It's not the way these are listed, but I do have let's go ahead and put It's a Wonderful Life out there first, because someone has to have it on their list, and I do genuinely love the movie. So I am unapologetic about that. I grew up in a household where a lot of old movies played. My parents are, I think, a little bit older than a lot of my peers' parents. So we had a lot of Turner Classic Movies on. We had older movies on instead of sports were going on in at least one house all the time. I grew up with a lot of films like that. And when we had basic cable, John, this is probably a familiar experience to you. There was a time when the film was out of copyright, and any station could play it at any time. And you could literally be flipping around, and it would be on several cable stations, 2 or 3 times a day there for a while throughout the Christmas season. And it was one of those movies you practically couldn't get away from if you had cable.
Right. And shown across multiple stations multiple times throughout the month of December. It was like, I think one time they had a marathon. One station had a marathon where they were showing that and A Miracle on 34th Street back to back. It was crazy.
Yeah, A Miracle on 34th Street could have been on this list. It's not, but it could have been. But I grew up in an idea of older traditional films like that, and It's a Wonderful Life, it kind of seems to epitomize that. It was released in 1946, stars Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed, directed by Frank Capra, who kind of specialized in these kind of surreal, focusing on an oldsy kind of a happy feeling, small town feeling, kind of the Saturday Evening Post kind of a thing that a lot of people embraced as an idea of America. I don't know that it ever really was that way, but there was this idea for a while. One of the things that has always stuck with me about this film, I am one of these guys that will sit there and I'll get choked up at the end. I'll admit it. But what really resonates with me is the idea that, you know, you have your main character coming out. He's a young man and he thinks he's going to go out and he's going to conquer the world, and he's going to make all these innovations and make all these changes. And then as life comes along and hits him one time after another, and you settle and you continue to settle and you continue to settle, and you look around and you wonder what happened. Where was that awesome guy that was going to go out and conquer the world, you know? And I can specifically remember, I always put it this way: when I graduated college, I knew it all. How about you, John? Do you have any feelings like that at one time?
Yeah. You know, when you're a kid, when you're young adult, you're immortal, you're invincible, you've got all the time in the world. And, you know, a lot of times you're sidetracked by some of the things that you're doing a little bit too much of. And sometimes you just fall into a rut and you just wake up and you know, realize, wow, you know, this is where I am. I thought I would be somewhere else, but life took me in this different direction. That becomes very, very poignant when you turn 50, folks. So all you kids out there, when you do, you wake up and you start to have a slightly different. I started early. It happened for me when I turned 40, but you know, 50 is like, you know, that pivotal moment in your life. So yeah, most definitely. It's something that you stop and you think about, but you also, as you get older and you find yourself in that line of thinking, you also start to come to realize what's important. Before, you may not have really taken into consideration what was important, what those things that mean the most outside of a career, outside of like your educational accomplishments and things of that nature. It gives you perspective on family. It gives you perspective on what type of person you are inside and who you are. And those are the most important. Those are the most important things in a person in their lives. And you don't see that at 20. I didn't.
No. Well, it's, you know, hey, you know, I was wondering how to kind of encapsulate this, and I think you done a perfect job as to exactly. I think at Christmas time is a good time to kind of reflect on ideas like that, to look at where you've been up till now. And for me, this movie really helps remind me, you know, I may be disappointed with this and that and a couple other things, but that there's so much to be grateful for. And you know, I have a good family. I've got a wonderful wife. Got some really good friends, and you know, I'd like to think that you know, I've made a difference in their lives. They've definitely made a difference in my life. And this movie, as corny as it can be, and as kind of saccharine sweet it is at times, and I guess it's rightfully kind of poked at for that sort of stuff, but it still resonates, this idea of you know, life can be really good, and at certain times we kind of need to be reminded of that. And the other part of this movie, of course, is the cliche, what has become such a trope. It's been used literally countless times, of the angel comes along in the third act and shows George what his life would have been like if he weren't born, and of course everything is terrible. And how many sitcoms have we seen that have shown that? And rather famously, Dallas finale way back in the 90s did an ironic twist on that with JR, and it's just been done so many times that I think there's a reason that this movie resonates with so many folks, and it resonates with me. And if we're gonna have this conversation, I can't pretend otherwise. It was a movie that was it was around a lot, and I've seen it on the big screen at least twice that I can remember, 2 different occasions around Christmas time. And it's just one of those, it gets me in the spirit. And to be honest, I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but it's on Amazon Prime and I'm planning on firing it up before Christmas. I'm looking forward to watching it again. Do you have any further thoughts on this, John?
No, I think we both pretty much summed the film up. I too enjoyed it. It's not in my top 5, but it is in my top 10. And I do remember watching it a lot as a child. Both RJ and I have parents who are part of the silent generation, which pretty much means they're in their like 80s.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. And so that being the case or whatnot, they were
our
in
parents.
the 30s.
Our parents were older than our peers, generally.
Right,
speaking.
exactly, yeah. And so you get that. And so I too was exposed to films of this ilk coming up as RJ was. So yeah, one little bit of tidbit of minor trivia for all you kids out there. Lionel Barrymore played in this film, and he is the great uncle of Drew Barrymore, who was someone you might be more familiar with in Hollywood history. So just a little bit of trivia there before we go on to my first film. So,
all right.
So first film on my list is Jingle All the Way. And Jingle All the Way came out in 1996, and it starred Arnold Schwarzenegger and comedian Sinbad. So the film, I will admit, is not the greatest Christmas movie at all. I mean, some people thought it was subpar, and some people just, flat out hated it. But I mean, and it has a low, very low rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But, I don't base everything that I like or dislike off of Rotten Tomatoes. I'd be a fool to do so, I feel. That being said, this film was very important to me because of what it represented with regards to, you have a man who's immersed into his work. He's a workaholic. He doesn't have the time. He can't find the time for his family, and things about his family are sidetracked for him to make more advancements in his career. And his kid, really wanted this toy, and he forgot to go get it. And so he has to make this mad dash to get it. And he's trying to find it at the store, and he's competing with these other folks in a desperate attempt to get it. And the whole journey that his character takes just to show to his son that he is paying attention, that he cares, that he's sorry for all the times when he wasn't as attentive as he should have been. That in itself, to me, is well worth the film. That's what makes it. And then, of course, you have the comedy aspects of it. You have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a big guy. And then you have Sinbad, who's another big guy. He plays a mailman who's trying to get the toy for his son. And they're back and forth about it. And it's just this comedic rivalry. And it also does a lot to show Arnold Schwarzenegger's comedic timing, because back in the day he was very much known for his action films and the big tough guy roles or whatnot. But then he started at this time in the late 80s, the early 90s, early to mid 90s, he started doing comedies. And so this is a very good display of his comedic talents, and started to give him some versatility, I think, as an actor. So that in and of itself is why I enjoyed this film so much. Um, I just it was so over the top. I just like it. It just resonated with me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask you. I'll share my experiences in a moment, but I'm curious. Did you ever have to like do a little hustle to get something for your kid at some point? Were you ever in a situation where you weren't sure if you were going to be able to get that thing or not, whatever it may be?
Yeah, yeah. I was once or twice. It was one of those situations where I had a network of people and ended up getting it between myself and my kid's mother and my mother. So that being said, that was one of those, phew, close moments or whatnot.
Yeah.
But we were able to get it. Most of the time, we had been very good about getting stuff early. When you're dealing with little kids, that's especially important. My kids are older. My youngest is 16 and my oldest is 27. So they get gift cards because I figured they're going to want to buy what they want, when they want, how they want. And they like it that way. So, it's one of those situations where I'm just, not in those situations anymore. And then for the grandbabies, we get them stuff in advance, and they're kind of young. So they don't really have a favorite toy that they're eyeing or whatnot. They pretty much anything you put in front of them, they're ready to play with. So
Yeah.
we've got a little bit of a break right now.
There you go. Yeah, so I saw this movie later. I did not see it in the theater. I was a parent. And so this movie really did resonate with me when I saw it. It's interesting in the sense that this movie probably most captures what most parents stress about over Christmas, and yet it's kind of unique, isn't it? I can't think of another movie that really kind of shows the shopping hustle the way that this one does. So I do think it's definitely a worthwhile movie. Now, I mean, you can poke at it about, well, it's just commercialism and it's just about the crasser side of Christmas, and that's true. But it's also the reality for a lot of people. If your kid wants something for Christmas, you feel like you kind of need to get it for them, and the bigger picture doesn't really matter at that moment. No parent wants to disappoint their kid. You can look at that as, whether it be financial situations or taking care of whatever. Christmas is a time when people's wishes are supposed to come true, and you want to make sure that that's going to happen. So I think from a bigger picture perspective, this movie is something that so many people go through. I have, like you, I've been very fortunate. My kids, first of all, they don't ask for a whole lot specific, but when they do, I've been connected to get the specific things they want. Mainly, my son is a big video game player, and he wants this title on this console.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Our sons are about the same age, so yeah, and they're both gamers. Yep.
And thank God for Amazon and GameStop.
Right.
I've heard stories from my mother about the hustles that my brother and I were terrible. I look back and I wanted a big track, and I wanted a 2XL, and I wanted to just, this,
big
that,
track.
and the other.
Oh, wow.
Crazy stuff. But the thing I heard she fought for the most and really had to work the hardest to get, which really makes me cry when I hear it, was the Atari Pac-Man game.
Oh, wow.
Which if you've not seen it or don't know the legend, it was horrible. It was really, really bad.
Yeah, it wasn't until Miss Pac-Man came along that the graphics were about anything.
There was all this build up that you could finally play Pac-Man on the Atari, and then when they got it, it looked like a wrench head going around eating little squares. It was pitiful. It was
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
pathetic representation.
Right.
But hey,
You were
my mom
still
hustled.
going. You were still going to the Pizza Hut to play the tabletop, even.
Damn straight I was. But now I can play it on my phone, the actual original
Right.
Pac-Man on my phone, and I do. But anyway, so I mean, good. I think it's a good pick. I think there's a lot to it. Yeah, it was hysterical. I've only seen it a couple of times. It makes me laugh every time I see it. But I think there's something there a lot of parents can relate to at some point in their life, and it captures it quite well. It's a lot of fun. So that's a good choice, John.
Thank you.
That brings me to my number 2, which is another obvious one. I thought I'd get the obvious ones out of the way, and that is A Christmas Story, which I'm sure you all know the movie A Christmas Story by now. But that movie came out in 1983. It stars Peter Billingsley, one of my favorite actors, Darren McGavin, and Melinda Dillon. Darren McGavin is basically known for 2 roles. That's Carl Kolchak of The Night Stalker and being the dad on A Christmas Story.
Right.
And as careers go, hey, that's pretty good actually. Highly entertaining movie at the time. So my memories of this are seeing it in the movie theater in 1983. I'm old enough that I was let's see, what would I have been? 15, I guess. And I guess it was it took place in Indiana, so I remember there was a really big deal about it coming out at the time here locally. And so legend has it the movie kind of bombed, but I don't remember that being the case. Like it didn't, like you read about it and they say it didn't do very well. It kind of became a classic later, a cult classic, and then kind of became the Christmas standard years later. My memory of it was sitting there in the theater laughing so much of it, and my friends and I talking about it for weeks afterwards, totally unaware that apparently the movie did not do very well. We had pretty well moved it into Christmas classic pretty much that year, and I never thought of it as anything other than that. And then of course so let me fill you in on a bit more if you don't know. This is a movie directed by Bob Clark. It's based on Jean Shepherd's semi-fictional anecdotes from his book In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, with some elements from his 1971 book Wanda Hickey's Night of Golden Memories and Other Disasters. I didn't know about that other book. I'd heard about the In God We Trust book. But I was doing research on Wikipedia and found that little bit there. But it was supposedly, so they say, it was in the late 80s and early 90s when TBS and TNT started showing it regularly that it kind of found its second audience. And that's kind of when it became more of the standard that we're aware of now. But, what I've always loved about this, well, first of all, it's a generation, probably more our parents' generation, maybe even prior to that. I'm not sure, because they're listening to the radio as kids. I guess that'd be about our parents' generation. So this, it's not direct memories of anything that I experienced as a child. You're kind of looking backwards to the kids before us, and yet the desire of having a specific thing that you really, really, really want for Christmas. Mine was an Atari, and and trying to lay the hints to the parents and trying to figure out, like, if you're not sure if it's something they're going to go for, how you're going to try and figure it out. That was so much the sort of stuff I did. And then, what is so often the big disappointment when you finally get that thing. you think it's gonna finally like somehow it's gonna change, somehow your life's gonna be different because you got this new toy or whatever, and of course it's never that way. But I related so much to Ralphie's situation in that movie, just about everything going on through there. The the parents trying to pretend that everything is normal, and thankfully I didn't have a father like Darren McGavin. That may have been more my mom's lane actually, but anyway, yeah, it's such a fun movie. Who doesn't love that part with the leg lamp? And there's just so many classic moments in there. But ultimately, the idea of Christmas is supposed to be this magical time when your life changes, and yet it doesn't. It's still kind of this crapshoot of your life is pretty much the same, and sometimes that thing that you thought would be so great doesn't really change your life, and really that shouldn't be a surprise. There's so much great comedy in this though, especially looking at watching him listen to the stuff on the radio, and you kind of see the beginnings of advertising and how it affects kids and that sort of stuff, and seeing where all of that ended up going. You kind of see the roots of all that. Started with the generation before ours, and it has continued. It's like, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And to me, it was a great movie right out of the gate, and remains a great movie. And I only found out later that it was not considered a success on its initial run. So what do you remember about this movie, John?
Well, I remember that we went to school and we were talking about this movie, and it was all the rage back in the 80s. I mean, it was even though it was set in a time prior to our birth, it was a coming of age film for kids of the 80s regardless. And Peter Billingsley at that time was in our age group, so we kind of related to the star of the movie being a kid, and right. So that became a thing, with regards to kids growing up in the 80s. So it became a staple, and I remember watching it over and over again. And then I thought that it was just hilarious. A lot of the comedic talent, as well as the chemistry amongst the actors, was spot on. I would watch it with my mother, and she would, of course, tell me, about how they used to listen to the radio, because they didn't have TVs. This was, I think my mother got her first TV. She was an adult in the 60s, when they got their first television. I remember coming up that we only had 2 TVs in the house. We had a big floor wood grain model, and then we had one little portable that my parents had in their bedroom, and then eventually they got me my own little portable. So
was it black and white?
The first one was, and then the next one, my great grandmother decided that she's going to upgrade me to color, even though she refused to watch color because she said it was bad on your eyes. That was a thing back then, because the newfangled contraption. Yeah. But my mother talked her into getting me the portable color TV, and I about flipped. The black and white I had, just to show my age a little bit here, it's shaped like the helmet of a astronaut.
Yeah. I remember. I remember those.
Yeah. So, fun times. But yeah, I remember this film. It is actually one of my honorable mentions. And I enjoy it. I try and watch it every year, just to, relive some of the magic from the first time that I saw it, and have a bit of nostalgia. If any of our listeners have not seen the film, I would recommend going ahead and checking it out. It's definitely.
I forgot to mention earlier the visiting Santa Claus, and what a nightmare that is, and how so often that's true. Where you know, the store's closing and you're rushed, and they're just trying to push you through so that you can say you technically had the experience. I seems like that was something that was going on back then and continues.
You know, for all the things that have changed in the world, some things just stay the same. And, you know, it's just, it speaks to things that surround the holidays. I know this particular holiday is different because of COVID-19 and how people have to adjust and, you know, whatnot. Just this little sidebar. I don't particularly like crowds, and I don't like going to the mall like anymore ever. There used to be a hangout for kids back in the day. I don't know if it still is, but you know, you go there, you look at clothes, you know, look at records. Yeah, I said records. You would you know, go to the food court, get something to eat. You know, you talk, you meet some friends or meet some girls or whatever. That was the thing, right? As an adult, you couldn't really pay me to go to the mall anymore. I don't like being around a lot of people like that. But Christmas time was different. Christmas time, I wanted to go to the mall once. I'm not one of those types of people that, you know, goes and stays there and goes back and forth during the Christmas time, because it really is most crowded then. But there's something about the atmosphere for doing it once in the season at that time that gives me some nostalgic good tidings, I guess, you know. And that's my thing. So I just thought I'd put that out there with regards to, you know, hustle bustle of going and dealing with the public during Christmas time.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on not loving crowds anymore. So what is your number 2, John?
My number 2 is This Christmas. Now, This Christmas is one of my favorite holiday movies because it is based off of one of my favorite Christmas songs. This Christmas was a Christmas song that the late, great Donny Hathaway put out on the year of my birth. Imagine that. Huh. Yeah, my trivia there.
That would be 50 years ago.
50 years ago, half a century. But it centers around the Whitfield family, whose eldest child has come home for the first time in 4 years. And the idea is that the matriarch of the family, played by the divine Loretta Devine, is she got a boyfriend now, you know, because dad stepped out on them when they were young and never came back, and so she's got a boyfriend played by Delroy Lindo. And so now this is the first time she's had all 6 of her children in the same place at the same time. And the children are the eldest is played by Idris Elba, who, you know, most geek people would know him, but mainstream movie people would know him as well. He's a big name. Regina King, Laz Alonso. If you don't know who Laz Alonso is, if you've watched The Boys on Amazon, he's Mother's Milk. And Sharon Leal, she's been in a lot of the films by Tyler Perry, Columbus Short, and Lauren London, and Chris Brown, the musician, the singer. And so there's a lot of sore feelings between the siblings, and there's a lot of issues because their father left them, and now mom's got a new boyfriend, and you not my daddy type situations, and all of these things come to bear. And, you know, I lived through some of that in my own life, so I kind of related a lot to that. But at the end of the film, as in most of these films, the family pulls together, and they realize that though some one new member of the family is not related by blood and is not their biological father, he loves them nonetheless because they're their mother's children, and he's accepted their mothers as his mate, and then he accepts them as his children, regardless. And that comes full circle with this film. Getting there is it's funny, but it's also very real, and there's some stakes involved. One of the characters is about to get jacked up, and someone has to come to their rescue, and it's the person they least expected to come to their rescue. And this opens up a dialogue which basically makes way for a new type of dynamic in their relationship. So that's what got me about this film. Not to mention the wide range of talent that is involved in this film, but also what's at the heart of it. And I think that that's a very important thing. And if you have not listened to This Christmas by Donny Hathaway, please do so. It's a very popular song. And at the end, this is one of my favorite little parts. I'm giving my age up again. The cast is in a Soul Train line, and if you don't know what Soul Train is, it was a music program back in the day that had performers come on, and then they would show people dancing to the music, and it was a thing. I grew up with it. Anyway, they played "Got to Give It Up," which is a Marvin Gaye song, and look that up too if you don't know. But they are doing the Soul Train line to "Got to Give It Up," and it's funny. And then Chris Brown sings "This Christmas" in the film, so you've got that going. So it just, if I can, I definitely recommend this film. While it's not one of the mainstream top films or whatnot. Again, I'm not so much into what everybody else likes. I like what I like, and so if I recommend something, it's because there's something in it that spoke to me. So I would suggest that you check it out for yourself. And yeah.
There you go. So a couple follow-ups from me. I do know who Marvin Gaye is. I have heard of Soul Train, and I know the song, but I don't know this movie. Is this a TV movie? Did it have a theatrical run? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it was released at the box office. It was when it first opened. It opened number 2. Next to Enchanted, of course, which came out at the time, and
right.
So you got people who are more in the know about that than this, So
right. Yeah, 2007.
Yeah,
2007 was my movie going was rare and kid friendly, pretty much. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to give you a little bit of bars for the people who I know that a lot of people have heard This Christmas and didn't know what they were listening to.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
All the mistletoe, I want to get to know you better. Do-do-doom-doom. This Christmas. Now, I'm not a singer, but your ears, I promise your ears won't bleed at that, but you will not go out and buy the album.
And I would tell you shutting us down. We're done now.
But
copyright infringement. Too many notes. No, I'm sure we're fine.
Right. But that's.
Yes, I do know that song. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people have heard it before. Maybe not familiar with Donny Hathaway by name, but have also probably heard his other music. And then another thing about this, just a little trivia about Donny Hathaway. His daughter, Layla Hathaway, is a songstress, and she's in our age bracket, RJ, and she's just a wonderful person. I met her in person. I went to her concert once here
Oh, okay,
in
cool.
Indy, and she's just delightful. I felt like I had known her like all my life. It was the craziest thing. I mean, I've been a fan since the late '80s when she first made her debut. You know, but she's an awesome performer, awesome person, and give her a shout out.
I suppose we should probably mention how these movies are available if they're available. So where can we find this one?
Well, if you have the Vudu, it's there for purchase there. I own it, of course. You know, I'm not sure where you might.
You're not sure if it's streaming anywhere right now,
right?
Yeah.
Where it's streaming, but you may want to look at Hulu. You may want to look at also Netflix and check those two. Those would be the most likely places to find it. But I think that you know, it's for me, it was well worth owning. So there you go. So I bought it when it first came out. So
absolutely. All right. So yeah, I'm not familiar with that movie. I will say I know kind of the struggle of when you're dealing with divorce or children amongst different parents, and that's something I experienced more after I got married with my wife and her parents, which created multiple Christmases, which was something I was not used to, and that was a situation that was not resolved. So I understand the awkwardness of that sort of thing, and you know, it's better when people can get along, but you can't always help that. That's not always the reality. So that's about the closest I can relate to with that one. But sounds like another good pick. So that brings me to my number 3 then, which is again probably another Mr. Obvious choice, but you know, it's my list, so it's what it's going to be. Mine is Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, a 1993 stop motion film by Tim Burton in the middle of his amazing run for Disney at the time, which I believe, you know, I mean, if you, depending on how you started, I guess it could be Batman and Batman Returns and
well, Beetlejuice starts it, doesn't it?
Was Beetlejuice before Batman?
I you know, I could be wrong. I thought that it was. It's very close at any rate.
They were very close, yeah. And then you've got like Mars Attacks and Edward Scissorhands, which completely blew my mind, and Sleepy Hollow. I don't know the exact order, but there was a run where all you had to do was tell me Tim Burton directed it, and you got my ticket.
Beetlejuice was the year. Beetlejuice came out the year prior to Batman.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, it was in 1988, and then it was Batman, and then it was Edward Scissorhands, and then, you know, The Nightmare Before Christmas. Yep.
But Pee-wee's Big
like
Adventure.
Almost it was like every year, every other year, he had a hit movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tim Burton had a run.
Yeah, all the way up into the late 1990s and early 2000s, because you had Sweeney Todd and then you had The Corpse Bride in the early 2000s. Yeah.
I cap it at Big Fish, but I mean we could debate, you know, exactly how long he had a long string that sort of tapered off. Now his name isn't quite as pristine as it was, but that's a conversation for another time. When this movie came out, it felt like someone was putting on film the stuff that was deep in my heart that I didn't dare say, you know? because I am such a fan of horror movies and Halloween and the dark and the creepy and the weird. I know you're surprised, John.
I'm shocked. I'm really shocked.
Yeah, but I also, also love Christmas and the holidays and everything that is. And I can remember going to see this movie, and I remember sitting there in the theater knowing I was watching something special, and knowing that this was going to be a huge classic. And there was controversy around the movie at the time. Was it too dark for kids? All this stupid stuff about, oh, gee, they torture Santa Claus. How are kids going to respond? And should parents take their... And I was like, oh, my God, you guys, it was so exactly on point. It was exactly the movie that Tim Burton wanted to make. And it was a movie that a certain kind of kid, of which I wasn't a kid, I was an adult at the time, but I understood that there were kids and teenagers who absolutely understood everything about this, what this movie was trying to be. The idea of, you have your misfit, but he has his group, he has his people. He's the king of Halloween Town, and he's not a loner. He's got a whole community behind him. Even though as a community, they're kind of ostracized from what you would consider normal society. And yet he's a good guy who wants to do the right thing. He just doesn't know how. And if that sounds like I'm talking about so many people that we know out there, so many artistic type people, so many writers you and I might know, John. Jack Skellington, he wants to do the right thing, and he doesn't. He ends up screwing things up badly. But he always has a good heart, and he has an optimism up to the very end. And I really like the fact, when you look at A Christmas Story, where Ralphie everything like things go very badly for Ralphie, and he kind of loses some of his luster at the end. Things go very badly for George Bailey. I mean, it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, Jack Skellington is the only one who, he does have the moment where he's like, oh, I kind of screwed this up. But then it's like, he's immediately like, oh, but I can fix it. It's okay. He never loses his optimism, and he's always out there trying to do the right thing, even if he doesn't do it correctly. And he's always willing to learn on how to be better. I just think it's interesting that the movie that is considered so dark has the character that is the most optimistic. And I think in a lot of ways, this movie has the most positive message of the set that we've been going through up to this point. But where I was going with that is, I just knew it. There were classic films that I had seen on television, and I knew that this was going to be one of them. And of course, it has gone on to become a major Christmas staple since then. And it went from being a movie that kind of spoke to a certain type of person to now, whether they admit it or not, I think most people relate to a whole lot of this film. I'm not gonna spend the time going through what the movie's about. I'm sure most of you have seen it and you're familiar with it. And if not, it's probably not going to interest you. But it's on, I think, Netflix and Disney Plus, and it's certainly a very, very available movie. And there's probably some people thinking, well, why make that one of your picks? But this movie, it spoke to me right off the bat, and it continues to speak to me, and it's one I like to revisit quite often. Tim Burton, at the top of his game, was doing something that no one else was, and I hope we see that guy again. I don't know if we will, but he's having a tough time right now. I wish him the best. He's had a rough decade or so, I'd say. But I'd love for that Tim Burton to come back and make a few more movies, because his was a really neat voice, and I think this was him at the top of his game. And it's no coincidence that he went with stop motion photography, because that certainly is a time honored tradition. We'll be talking about that later, quite possibly. So, what are your thoughts, John?
Well, definitely have some thoughts where this film is concerned. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very interesting take on a Christmas film with like a horror bent to it. I can't say enough about the popularity of this film, and you know, how it was put together. It was very well put together. And just a little bit of trivia side note here: the idea for this film was actually originated from a poem that Tim Burton wrote in 1982 while he was working as an animator at Walt Disney Productions, and he had considered developing it into a short film, like 30 minutes. Just to clarify, this is a short film in terms of running time. It's only 76 minutes. But it packs a lot of emotion. It packs a lot of story into that short time. And I think that is something to be said. It's something to be said that this was released by Disney Pictures, which also, lends itself to things that aren't too dark. And, you've got that got into the controversy that you were speaking of, when some people were feeling that the film was too dark for kids and all that kind of stuff, which I thought was crazy, just silliness. But other things to mention about the film, production value wise, is that Danny Elfman wrote the songs and the score for the film, and Danny Elfman and Tim Burton have a long history of working together on most of Burton's films. Danny Elfman wrote the score to the Batman film in 1989. He was involved in, I think he was also involved in the Beetlejuice, but I'm not sure. I know that they have a long running working relationship where this is concerned, where films are concerned. Also, one other thing, Chris Sarandon was the voice for Jack Skellington. He's an actor of note. You may
Welcome to Fright.
You may be familiar with his wife, Susan Sarandon.
Yes.
She's been in a lot of things, from guest roles in Friends, Malcolm in the Middle, as well as being in other films such as The Witches of Eastwick.
Another big Chris Sarandon movie would be The Princess Bride, if people are uncertain who he might be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, just a little bit of trivia there, but yeah, this is one of my honorable mentions. I like the film. I will say one last thing about the film. It is a marketing juggernaut.
Oh yeah.
You can't go anywhere, without seeing some Jack Skellington stuff. And and it's like and just to give you an example, my stepdaughter is a huge The Nightmare Before Christmas fan, and she has all kinds of stuff in, Jack Skellington, everything. She's got a Jack Skellington shirt on right now.
Nice.
I know this literally because she spent the weekend with us, so that just to give you an example. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I know Disney was a little uncertain about it, but once that movie took off, they jumped all over it, and obviously there's no controversy anymore. It is pretty well universally acclaimed, and I think rightfully so. I think it speaks to people on a number of levels that probably they're not even aware of, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Well, we've reached a conclusion for that, I'll start on my third pick.
Go for it.
and that is Almost Christmas. Now, Almost Christmas is a comedy drama. I mean, you're gonna think, wow, he's got a pattern of comedy dramas with, with his Christmas picks, and I do. This particular film was directed by David E. Talbert, and it's starring Danny Glover. Most people will know who Danny Glover is. Kimberly Elise, Monique, Nicole Ari Parker, Gabrielle Union, Carrie Hilson, Jesse Usher, Omar Epps, and John Michael Higgins, along with Romani Malco. And basically, this is another film that talks about a dysfunctional family. Danny Glover plays Walter Myers. He's a retired automotive engineer who lost his wife, Grace, played by Rachel Killian, 10 months earlier. Now, the movie talks about their marriage. It was one that was just so sweet, how they came to be, when they got married, how they had the kids, and how they lived their life. And she would always bake him a sweet potato pie for Christmas, and it was the best thing ever. It showed this. And it showed something within their marriage that a lot of people would aspire to have. And that was one of the things that touched me right off the bat as far as this film was concerned. But we flash forward to a time 10 months after Grace's death, and it's the holiday season. So he invites his 4 adult children and the rest of the family to the house for a traditional celebration. And you have to understand that he's a widower, so she's lonely, and the holidays are coming, and he feels he wants to have his family together, which is understandable. He has his daughters, Gabrielle Union and Kimberly Elise. He has his sons, Romani Malco and Jesse Usher, to come and spend Christmas under the same roof. Now, as you know, if you have any siblings, there's sibling rivalry, there's just unrest, depending upon your relationship with your siblings, could be how much or how little there is, but it's always there to some extent. And so you've got all of these grown folks in the house, and they have their own lives, and they are a lot more critical of one another than maybe they should be. There's old saying that, before you start commenting on someone else's house, you should probably get your own house in order. And that definitely plays a big part in what's going on here. But they all come together and rally around the father, Danny Glover, and they remember at the end what Christmas is supposed to be about, which this regard is family and what's important, and that, their mother would not want them behaving in this manner. And she was the true matriarch of this family, and definitely is heartwarming to see families come together in any situation. But it's also a lot of comedy. I mean, Monique, you can say what you will about her as far as her personal life is concerned. Some people always have something to say about somebody, but she's hilarious to me. She has been since I first saw her. So she definitely shined in this particular film. And Danny Glover, you can't go wrong. I mean, he looks like somebody's dad. He has since the first time I saw him. I mean, right. he looks like dad, and so that's definitely, worth mentioning. It's also worth mentioning that this film was produced by Will Packer. Now, some people may not know who Will Packer is, but he is executive producer for several films of note: Girls Trip, Ride Along, and Think Like a Man. So definitely somebody who's been around and done some things, and he's a very talented producer. So you might want to check out some of his work as well.
Okay. I'm not familiar with this movie. Based on your summary, though, I mean, my thoughts are how tough it is when there's a change in the family. Someone passes away or moves away or whatever, and you know how important traditions are to us, and then we lose someone who's close to us, and that tradition's changed forever, or it's just something you're never going to do again. My wife lost her parents recently, and we had several traditions that had been built up over years that are no longer valid, and it kind of creates a void, and you have to kind of find new ways to fill that void, along with all the other stresses that are going on. And it sounds like this is touching upon some very real emotions that people have to deal with at Christmas time. Would that be accurate?
Yes, most definitely. That is definitely one of the most important plot points in this film, and you know, dealing with loss and looking to the future and what the future is going to look like, and people remembering again what's important. And a lot of times in our busy lives that we're working and pursuing our passions and our careers, we sometimes lose sight of what's most important, and making time for that and being understanding of that, and keeping that in the forefront of our minds, because, you know, at the end of the day, what are you doing all the other stuff for? 9 times out of 10, it's your family, and they need that. You need each other, and that lends into the spirit of Christmas.
Absolutely. It doesn't sound like the movie goes anywhere supernatural. That's almost where I thought you were going when you started talking about it, though. It keeps everything pretty real.
Yeah. No, nothing supernatural, just very heartwarming, family oriented film.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. And is that one available?
Yeah, that's pretty available. If you not everybody has BET, but it's on BET.
Gotcha.
And you know, you will probably, again, you can check out Hulu and maybe Netflix and see if they have it. But then again, if you have Vudu, you can rent it there, or you can purchase it there.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So my fourth pick is sort of a subcategory of what could be considered its own subgenre, I guess. So I'm curious to get your thoughts about the novella. You may have heard of it. It's called A Christmas Carol. It's kind of popular. It's been remade a couple times.
Just a little bit, you know.
Yeah. So I looked up, you know, to research this. I actually looked up versions of A Christmas Carol, and it was literally a countless page. I mean, I had no idea. I thought I had a pretty good handle of how many versions are out there, and I mean, basically, it seems like from the moment the camera was invented, I gotta think A Christmas Carol is one of the first things he must have adapted. It goes back that far. I think there was something like 1902 or something, and then 1907 and 1912. I mean, there was probably 15 silent movies before you even got the sound. But I'm thinking of some of the more popular, more famous ones, and
you're only going to deal with the talkies.
Exactly. Yes. And then my very favorite from that, which I think is a pretty unique take. I want to give you a little more about the novella and what it means to me. However, is the fact that as many versions of this as I've watched, and as many times as I've sat down and watched certain tellings of the story, and I'm not going to go through it, for God's sake. If you don't know it, then I don't know what to tell you. But but, you know, go find one. There's one out there. Disney's CGI one, I'm not a big fan, but I mean, it'll at least give you the basics, and, you know, take 90 minutes and go check it out. But I had never read the story. I had never actually read the story. And so this year I finally decided I should do something about that. And I sat down with the audiobook, which was narrated by Tim Curry. And the language used in there, you know, you can watch, I'll just give you two examples. You can watch the George C. Scott TV movie from the 80s. I think a lot of people are familiar with that one. Mm-hmm. And then you can watch the Patrick Stewart version from the 90s. And it's going to be 95% the same, the exact same stuff. I mean, the lines are going to be the same. The deliveries are really where things are a bit different. But for 95% of it is pretty much the exact same material. But what you don't get is the narrative connecting stuff, the actual text, which I was fairly unfamiliar with and was very surprised to sit down. It's about a 3.5 hour listen. And I imagine it would take a bit less to just sit down and actually read it. I have less patience for actually reading books than I used to. I used to be an avid reader, but that's another conversation. The point is, hearing it read to me by a narrative master like Tim Curry, who brings all the voices and all the drama, it was its own unique, fun experience, and also presented a side of the narrative that I didn't know very well and was worth digging into. So, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on different versions. Do you have like a favorite version that you prefer over others, or is this something you've even given much thought, John?
Well, let me just start with the fact that this is Dickens.
Well, yes.
I own the complete library leather-bound edition of Dickens. I've cracked it open once since I've owned it. I'm not a fan of Dickens. It's more a collector's item. That being said, luckily, this is one of my favorite, the really only story that I really can say that I like. I respect the other stuff, but this is the thing that I actually can say that I like. And yes, I have to say that I prefer the Disney Uncle McScrooge, version. I
thought you were gonna call me. I thought you were gonna call me out on the CGI movie I just dogged.
No, but anyway, I like the animated one better. I think that it was more fun to watch.
I remember
how many times can you see an old white guy with mutton chops go through the ringer to finally find his heart? The story's been. It was written. It first published in 1843. That was almost 200 years ago. It'll be 200 years ago in our lifetime.
Yes, yes, you're right. You're right.
It's like, no.
It's been told a lot, no doubt about that. Yeah,
right. And of the ones that you mentioned, I'd say that I think that the George C. Scott one was was the favorite of them. If I was ranking them from favorite to least favorite, it would be the George C. Scott version, the Muppet version, Patrick Stewart version, and then the Albert Finney version. That's my list of from most liked to least liked. George C. Scott looked like an asshole in most of the things that he was ever in, and he looked like an ass on this. So
If I were picking a favorite straight up dramatic uh, uh, film version, the George C. Scott one, is my favorite. It's dirty and gritty. You really feel like you're on the streets of England with hanging out with the peasants. The Patrick Stewart one, I think, is a little overdone for me. The Patrick Stewart did that. He did that at a time when he could have read his grocery list, and I think they would have filmed it and made a movie out of it. And there was that time in his career when he could do no wrong, and I feel like a little more self-restraint would have helped that particular production.
I was expecting Tiny Tim engage. I mean,
yeah, right. Exactly. It was a little much, but I've warmed to it over the years. The first couple times I watched it, I didn't think that much of it. I definitely enjoy A Muppet Christmas Carol for very much the same reason that I am picking Scrooge, the 1970 musical, as you have mentioned, as my number 4 pick. The musical with Albert Finney and Alec Guinness before he was Obi-Wan Kenobi. This was the first place I can remember seeing him as Bob Marley, or excuse me, as Marley. I don't remember.
Oh wow! I was like, really? I don't remember
that. But yeah, as Scrooge's dead partner, and this was one of the first versions of the story I actually saw, but the fact that it was a musical, I think kind of gave me expectations going forward, because I remember watching this as a little kid. And I'm not going to say I was new to the story. I really don't remember, but I had never seen it presented this way before. When I talked about feeling like you're down in the dirt, everything looks kind of dirty and used, and even though it's a musical, it never has that artificial look to it. It feels like you're actually there in the grimy snow, walking around. Albert Finney's got the old man makeup going on at the time, which is very effective. But the music, you got Thank You Very Much, which there are people who probably have heard the song and don't even necessarily realize where it came from. The Ghost of Christmas Present, played by an actor named Kenneth Moore, who I'm not familiar with. I looked him up before we came on. I looked him up, his career. Apparently he's an actor of some regard, but I did not, I got to be honest, they were all British productions. I did not recognize any titles, but his performance as the Ghost of Christmas Present is just incredible, along with Alec Guinness, telling Scrooge about the ghosts coming. And there's just so much about this I love, because you don't have 95% the same thing. They play around with the script. They play around with your expectations a great deal. They add a lot to the dialogue. Obviously, there's no songs in the original novella, and it was my favorite early on. And I can remember there was a time in the 80s and into the 90s when it seemed like the world had kind of moved on and people had forgotten about that version for a number of years. And I would always come back to it as a personal favorite, as, well, this is what I remember seeing as a kid, and I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember being really blown away by it. And then somewhere in the late 90s, it kind of had the second wind comeback, and now it's a fairly well-regarded rendition, and I stand by it as my favorite, even though there are, I think, a number of good versions out there. I have to mention A Muppet Christmas Carol, because that's one I see pop up on my Facebook all the time. I think it has, because it is the Muppets, and because they never do things straight up. I mean, there's a lot of fun to be had there. And I think compared to other versions, if you're not familiar with this and you think you've seen A Christmas Carol done to death, this is one worth checking out, because it's got a lot of things to offer that you're not going to see in any other version, including a scene where Scrooge goes to hell. Do you remember that part, John?
Very vaguely. I only remember bits and pieces of the film. I haven't seen it in decades, to be honest with you.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so after the ghost of Christmas yet to come, spoilers if you're not familiar, um, and he sees his tombstone, and he falls down. You know, they have this moment where he falls down into his grave, and he basically falls to hell. And he lands in this icy cavern, and Alec Guinness shows up again as Marley, and he's like, "Well, congratulations, Satan's decided to give you a job here. You're going to work here as an accountant as you have in life, and you've got the only cold room in all of hell, basically." And it's got like this frosty, wintry room where he's sitting there shivering and everything. And then he's like, "And they're going to bring in your chain now." And you have like this whole group of guys bringing in this huge chain that they throw over his shoulder. And at the very end, he's screaming and he's back in his bed at that point. That's, as a little kid, it's a really terrifying moment. And it is completely unique to this version of it. Frequently cut when they show it on TV. But if you catch it, on a streaming service or catch the DVD, the original cut, I gotta tell you, it was pretty shocking for this story. That's just one of many things that I think make this. It made an impression on me as a kid, and it continues to make an impression on me. And I'll watch it just about every year. It's definitely one of my go-to holiday films. So yeah, that's my view on A Christmas Carol overall, and my recommendation of the best of those adaptations.
Well, I'll say one other thing.
Sure.
When it comes to Alec Guinness, that's who I wanted to talk about. So the
Yeah,
first time
yeah.
I saw Alec Guinness was actually in Lawrence of Arabia. I didn't know who he was. He was just a dude. You know, I mean, he was just this dude that was in the movie,
Right.
the prince or whatnot or whatever. So I really didn't know who he was. I didn't know much about it. It was just, it came on Sunday. I'm a kid. I'm watching TV, you know.
Mhm.
But he wasn't anyone that I knew by name until 1977 in Star Wars.
Sure.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. But I remember when I saw that movie, I was like, he looks familiar. And then my mother told me what movie he was in, and I was like, oh, because we didn't have the internet back then, so you had to basically talk to people to try and figure stuff out. You know, it wasn't like you could just look it up. It wasn't
Right.
that kind of world back then. So, you know, it was like, you know, do you remember this guy? And then it was like, yeah, I remember him from so and so. Oh, okay. You know, that's kind of how you figured these things
How you did
out.
it.
Yep,
Yep.
exactly. So I just wanted to put that in there with Alec Guinness, Sir Alec Guinness. Yeah.
Yes, and the only for me, he was Bridge on the River Kwai as well, which is another great
Oh yes.
older film. And
Yes, definitely a classic war film that if you haven't seen, kids, go check that out.
yeah, and I'm almost 100% certain when I watched Scrooge, I was oblivious as to who was playing that part, and then revisited it later post Star Wars and went, "Oh, okay, it's Alec Guinness. Okay, cool."
Mhm.
I'm sure I didn't make the connection at the time as a kid. There'd be no reason I would have necessarily. I doubt I'd seen either of those movies before Scrooge. So
Right.
anyway, that's my recommendation. I think that might be perhaps the one deep cut pick, even though it doesn't seem like it. I'm surprised how many people are still completely unfamiliar with that version, and I am a relentless horror of pushing that movie on people when I get a chance. So I definitely think everyone needs to see it.
All right. Well, with that, I guess I will go to my number 4.
All right.
And that is Black Nativity. Now, Nativity is a 2013 musical drama, and it was directed by Cassie Lemons. For those of you who might not know who she is an actress and a film director. Okay. She was in Candyman. She was the neighbor lady, the girl who ended up getting killed with she had the Rottweiler. Yeah. So,
Okay.
And then she's went on to direct films such as Eve's Bayou, Caveman's Valentine, both starring Samuel L. Jackson, and more recently Harriet, which was about Harriet Tubman.
Right, I remember that coming out.
Yeah, so just so you would know who she is as the director. It was a script that was written by her, but it's based off the Langston Hughes 1961 play of the same name. Now, hopefully, if you are a fan of literature, you know who Langston Hughes is. He's a poet and novelist. If you don't, please check him out. He's part of the Harlem Renaissance, and he's one of my favorite writers. So I would suggest that you go check him out. Anyway, we've got an ensemble cast in this film. We've got Forest Whitaker, Angela Bassett, Tyrese Gibson, Jennifer Hudson, Mary J. Blige, Jacob Lattimore, and Vondi Curtis Hall, as well as Nas, the rapper. So basically you have a young mother who sends her teenage son to spend the holidays with his estranged grandparents in New York. You know, you've got a young kid and he's going through some things and he's trying to find his way, but he's teeter-tottering on going down a bad path. Okay. And I remember that had very much the same kind of, wake up moment that this character has. With regards to which path I'm going to choose for my life. I very well could have chosen a different path than I did and ended up in the grave or in jail right now. So there's definitely some kinship that I have to the character. His grandparents are portrayed by Forest Whitaker and Angela Bassett, and his mother is portrayed by Jennifer Hudson. So he goes to spend time with his grandfather, his grandparents. His grandfather tries to reach out to him, but he's still stuck into that, kind of street mentality, deviant behavior, partly growing pains from being a kid. And another part is just his environment that he grew up in. But during the course of this, he starts to discover what family is about and why it's important not to go down that path and what that path can lead to. And then you have a dream he has where he's part of the nativity scene, hence Black Nativity. And he's dreaming this with people that he knows playing the parts of the various characters in the nativity scene. And this awakens something in him, and it shows him some different things about life. And it also gets him in contact with his father, who had been missing. Now, he finds out why his father isn't in the picture. And this comes to his mother and his father and his grandparents having one of those moments where they face up to their sins, and they realize that even though their intentions were for good purposes or whatnot, that the execution and whatnot tended to have a detrimental effect on Langston, and could have very well been his undoing. And I think that all of those things culminating together in the climax of the film was what got me. And everyone's part in this was spot on. The acting was superb. The music was awesome. Music was provided by Laura Cartman and Raphael Sadiq. If you don't know who Raphael Sadiq is, he is one of the three Tonys in Tony, 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 a group that was popular in the late 80s to mid 90s. And he went on and has a solo career of note now. So definitely it's a short film. It's only an hour and a half long, but it's very powerful in the message that it conveys. And of course it's based on a play by Langston Hughes, again, one of my favorite writers. And I say writer because he's not only written novels, but also stage play, screenwriting and poetry. So definitely something to take a look at. You're either going to like it or you won't. You're either going to relate to it or you won't. I did. And it has some accolades. Angela Bassett won a NAACP Image Award for this film back in 2014. And it has had an average grade of A- on an A to F scale by audience polls by Cinescope, or Cinescore rather. So okay. Definitely something to check out, I think.
You made some picks where you really these don't seem like casual viewing films necessarily, even though they're holiday movies. Would that be fair in the case of this movie?
Yeah, there's some introspection that's needed for these films. I mean, with the exception of my number one, which, there's some deepness to it. That was one of the more silly, wacky, goofy, fun type movies. But the rest of them are a little bit more grounded in family dynamics and reality, and something that you can relate to, as a person, and get some lesson. It is, Jingle All the Way had a lesson, but these are more grounded in their lessons. Sure. Although there are some comedic elements in This Christmas and Almost Christmas, it's more of a comedic drama. So there's a lot more drama, a lot more sense of that the characters have something at stake. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So basically you and I have the same last movie left. However, you have some honorable mentions here. You mentioned A Christmas Story, and another honorable mention is The Nightmare Before Christmas. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the third honorable mention on your list?
Okay, well, the third honorable mention on my list is The Best Man Holiday. And that was a 2013 film starring Morris Chestnut, Sanaa Lathan, Taye Diggs, Nia Long, Terrence Howard, and Regina Hall. The Best Man Holiday was actually a sequel to the film The Best Man. And The Best Man came out in 1999. One of the important things about this film is that all the actors are in my age group. So when the 1999 first film came out, which was, both films were directed and co-produced by Malcolm D. Lee. I was the character's age. I was able to directly relate to the things that they were going through and the subject matter. And just to set this up briefly, The Best Man was about a group of college friends who've gone on in their professional lives and coming together to for a wedding, hence the title, The Best Man. But as they are reminiscing about the old days, some truths about things that happened in the past while they were in college come to light, and it threatens friendships. It's really hard stuff to deal with. Another thing that got me to all of this is Taye Diggs plays the main character, Harper, and he's an up-and-coming author with a debut novel. So, this fits right into where I was in my life with regards to, being an author and things of that nature. So definitely drew me in with that. You've got a wonderful cast, a talented cast here. So it's interesting to note that Malcolm D. Lee, if you're not familiar with him as a director, he is a cousin of Spike Lee. And this film was
Okay.
produced with the 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks. Just giving you a little bit of heads up in case some people are unfamiliar. Anyway, this particular film, The Best Man Holiday, is a sequel to The Best Man, and it's dealing with all of the issues that were brought to bear in the first film, but how these characters have moved on after 14 years have passed. And so they're well into their professional careers and moving on, some moving on to different areas within their fields or whatnot. And the thing is that they're all brought back together for Christmas, and everything centers around Christmas, and it all comes to a head when some things are explored with these characters. Come to find out that one of the main characters' wife has developed a terminal disease, and her plight, which was that character was the center of what was going on in the first film and what caused a lot of the tension between a lot of the characters in the first film. That in this second film, it's her plight that's bringing the characters back together and reaffirming the bond that brought all these characters together, because they were all college kids when they met. And then, well, some of them knew each other prior to that, but they were all college friends. And if you've been to college or been, in that time, that space, the headspace of being in your late teens, early 20s, you remember how you're hanging out with your friends and what all that entails and all of the things that go along with that, and how the relationships are built and so forth and so on. Some of them lasting, some of them, you haven't seen these people in 10, 20, 30 years, and, being brought together, what all that means. And I think that this film, to me, what it did for me was that it showed growth. You're taking people who in the first film were like in their late 20s, early 30s, and then now they're in their early 40s. You're a different person. You're a different person from that time in your life. And you think about things differently. You appreciate things differently, and you are going to react to things differently. And I think that that's one of the things that I most appreciated about this film. This film did very well. It beat out Thor: The Dark World as a top box office spot for that day. I'm not saying that film was great, by the way, Thor: The Dark World. It was not great, but I liked it. But, as far as Thor films, in popularity go. But anyway, definitely is a good film and was well received by critics and fans alike. So
it's interesting that they made a sequel 13 years apart. That can be tricky. It sounds like they were very successful at keeping the continuity and the tone and being able to have a logical follow-up to the storyline from 13 years back.
Well, another thing to be said about that too is the actors themselves. A lot of these actors had stayed in touch. They'd actually been in other films together. Sanaa Lathan and Taye Diggs were in a film called Brown Sugar, which, was a romantic comedy between the time that those films were produced. So you have a lot of these same actors who are on different projects together who have a natural chemistry. I'm sure you remember the Brat Pack from the 80s, basically the cast of Breakfast Club, and how those actors also starred in other films together throughout the 80s and early to mid 90s or whatnot. And there was a chemistry because they were all friends in real life. So it was kind of easy sell. And I think that's one of the things that lends to the fact of how they were able to pull this off.
Yeah.
was that these actors were very familiar with each other's works. They'd worked together before. They were comfortable, and there was a camaraderie, and they were really genuinely friends in real life. So I think that is what made this doable, and for them to be able to excel at this film.
And though it was just the two best man movies, there was nothing in between.
No, not with these characters.
Gotcha.
What I will say is that there's been talk of a third film, but it just never came to fruition. It was put on hold indefinitely 4 years ago. I doubt we will see that anytime soon, but that would also be interesting too, because now these characters would be in their 50s, so they'd have grown kids with kids of their own, which would be it'd be something I'd want to see, most assuredly, just from the talent and just from the chemistry that all the characters have. So it would definitely be something I'd want to see, but who knows if that's ever going to come to fruition. One other thing that I will mention about this particular film is the soundtrack is got a lot of star talent. Jordan Sparks, Mario, Fantasia, Charlie Wilson, R. Kelly. Yeah, I'm mentioning him because he was popular at the time, but, not a very good person. Mary J. Blige, John Legend, Monica, New Edition, Neo. Marsha Ambrosius and Anthony Hamilton. You've got huge talent in this soundtrack.
Very cool. So, we've been pretty dark and serious here for a while, and our final choice happens to match. So we're going to continue this dark and serious tone here. So John and I both have on our list. We decided to save until the end. It's a little movie. It actually is not a movie. This is a TV special. You may have heard of it. It's called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Originally made in 1964, and it was the first. I did not know this until I went researching it. It was the very first Rankin Bass stop motion animated Christmas special, of which there were many that followed, which I'd like to talk about a little bit. But starting with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You're probably familiar with what that story is about. If not, you can pause and look up the song, and that summarizes it quite nicely. But this movie, excuse me, I keep calling it a movie. We've been doing movies, but this was a TV special. It was created using the stop motion process, which has always fascinated me, that's the route that Rankin Bass went with so many of these, because it seems kind of like it constricts your creativity, where you have to move a model and snap it, and it takes like weeks to create a few seconds of film. I've always found it interesting that there are certain types of children's animators and certain people that choose to work in that craft, where it seems like there would be simpler ways to do some of these things. Even at the time, you would think straight up animation might have been an easier way to go, but they wanted to do something that made it stand out from the rest, and as a consequence, something that stands the test of time. So before we dig in here a little bit, I think one of the first things I want to say, of course, this is a show that would come on every year prior to when either of us were born, and would continue to pop up every single year, and is now pretty ubiquitous. It's very available. You can find it. And I'm sure many of you have seen it many times, but one of the things that strikes me about this particular story is what it means to you as a kid, and then the different things it comes to mean when you get older as an adult and you watch it from an adult perspective, because you know, as a kid, I mean, for me, I was very much rooting for Rudolph to he's trying to prove his self-worth to the people around him who you know, he gets picked on, he gets bullied, but you want to see him kind of prove himself to the people around him, and kind of almost like validate his existence in a world that kind of doesn't. And so when it comes around at the end and he's needed to help save Christmas and everybody cheers him on as a hero, you're so excited for Rudolph. And then as you through repeat viewings, I came to realize, you know, all of the bullying and everything going on in there, and the fact that, you know, Rudolph and his friends should not have had to prove who they are. They should not have they should not have gone through all the things that they go through. They should have been appreciated for their uniqueness, and people should have understood better, been kinder to them. And I'm not really saying anything that is a big shock, except that you do go through a mental change as you look at it as an adult, and you see the cynical world that is presented, that unfortunately so many people can relate to. I can look at that and go, okay, this is a fantasy about Santa Claus and all that, but my God, people are mean, people are cruel, and this program captures it so perfectly. And the fact that nobody can see his worth until they need his particular talent, and then all of a sudden he's a great guy, you know. I just think it's interesting that they made this show for little kids with such a cynical viewpoint. Rudolph had to go off and find other misfits like himself to find his own place in the world, and he wasn't appreciated until it just so happened that his weird talent was what was needed. And I can remember it took a while for that to click. I mean, I think a lot of that subtext doesn't come to you as a kid, but I think it's interesting. I'd like to go back and know if the people that constructed this story had any idea that they were building something on so many levels that come to mean so many things to kids and adults, you know, when you view it at different times. For us personally, I'm going to change tacks just a little bit, but this became we have this on DVD, and we pop it on every time it's time to build the tree out front. So anytime we're putting the tree up, we did it one year, we put it on, and we watched the whole thing while we were, you know, putting up the artificial tree and stringing the lights and putting the ornaments on. And then the next year, it was the kids that were like, well, now we got to watch Rudolph while we do this. So it became an annual, you know, I was talking about annual traditions. This is our annual tradition. We watch this on tree building day. So that's what the show has come to mean to us. But there's a reason I think it's so rewatchable. I think there's just so much more there than seems to be the first couple times you watch it. So, John, what do you think?
Well, to speak to this particular production from my perspective, this was something that I grew up with, much like RJ. It was something that we watched every year. I still watch it every year. There's a lot of nostalgia here, and there's a lot of feelings of what this meant back then. Coming up, you know, it just puts you in the spirit of the holidays, because it was Rudolph and it was Santa and it was the other reindeer, and it was just, you know, and then you had Hermie and Yukon Cornelius. You know, you had all of these characters, and they're just very familiar. So I watched this and I'm just taken back to that time.
Sure.
to speak to the seriousness of the of Rudolph being an outcast and things of that nature. If you haven't watched this, it's definitely worth watching. Let me just say that Rudolph's father was an asshole. I mean, he was just an asshole. There's no other way. I mean, you wanted to kick him in his reindeer nuts. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, you know, I was thinking, even as a kid, you know, I wasn't using this term, but I was thinking, my God, his father's a dick, you know? And I mean, you know, and so anyway, with all of that being said or whatnot, I wanted to speak to why that didn't surprise me at all, because of when this film was made. This was 1964. Right. There were a lot of people back at that time who were not going to accept you for being who you were. Mm-hmm. This was at the height of the civil rights movement. I mean, there are so many things that were going on in the world where not being accepted and being ostracized and whatnot, and feeling like a misfit was par for the course. So of course it's reflective. I think what you were talking about to me was very reflective of the time frame in which this show was produced. Now, today, you wouldn't have anything like this today. But then again, society and how people are viewed and how people interact and what, you know, is considered appropriate has changed dramatically. I mean, this was like almost, this was be close to 60 years here in the next 3 years, you know.
It's true. Yeah.
That this show came out. And so, you know, you have to take those things into consideration, which is why it didn't surprise me at all. You know, but what was surprising for me was that they knew the period they were in, they knew the subject matter, they knew how people acted at that time, and they knew that they had to make this upbeat at the end. It had to have some lesson. Right. And I think the lesson was falling into what was new for that decade. And if I wasn't around in the 60s, but I was around in the 70s, and we dealt with the fallout from the 60s, very much so. So that being said, when you look at the new movements of the 60s, when you had the Flower Children, you had the Peace, Make Love, Not War, and this is leading into the 70s, which was almost like a free for all for, you know, free love. We were just coming from Woodstock and all of this in the 70s. So you dealing with the 60s when this was produced. It's funny to me, in my assessment of it, is that they started with how the 40s and the 50s and the early 60s were with regards to identity and, you know, being bullied and all this kind of stuff, and just, you know, making war, making friction. There's just, you know, he's got a nose that shines, he's a freak, you know, and this kind of stuff. But at the end, we come to the lighter part of the 60s when people were looking to make social changes. Mm-hmm. So yes. To me, the show almost goes through, and it basically encapsulates what the 60s was doing.
Yeah.
That's my introspection on it.
Yeah, I would just love to know how much of it was intentional. I just can't imagine being these two, because they made it to the 2000s, right? I mean, they lived long enough to see their own legacy come through, and know that this show was going to outlive them, and that it was well regarded and well thought of. I just have to wonder if the people working on it in 1964 had any clue that this was going to be anything that was going to just anything beyond, it'll run a couple years and then people will forget about it, which was usually the mindset if you were working in TV back then. No one was thinking, you know, I like to talk when people talk about Star Trek, the animated series, and how these these episodes don't hold up. I'm like, they didn't make it for a 50-year-old in 2020. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right,
They made it for a 7-year-old in 1973. It's not meant to be looked at that way. But this show seems to be something that you can approach at any age, and I just wonder how much of that was intentional, how much of it was just a big fat happy accident where everything just happened to come together just right, and it resonated. Was it intentional or wasn't it? I'd love to think that these were brilliant people that knew exactly what they were doing the whole time, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to find out, they just thought they were making a one-off Christmas special, and then they were going to do their next job, and what happened after that was kind of out of their control. But either way, I think it makes it pretty special for sure, because you and I have seen lots of Christmas specials come on a year, and then a couple years later, who knew, who cares. I'm having a hard time thinking of one. Oh, you know what? Do you remember Henry Winkler in American Christmas Carol? Going back to my previous choice. That was a thing of the 70s that lasted maybe a year or two.
Yeah. I don't.
As an example of something that has not stood the test of time. So,
right.
I mean, yeah, there's lots of others. There's probably better examples, but I mean, we've all seen the thing of the moment come and go, and then this thing just it's lived forever. So,
well, just to interject here, Arthur Rankin Jr. passed away in 2014. However, Jules Bass is still living and is currently 85.
Well, there you go then. So, that's amazing. That
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of leads into a bigger conversation, which I have a feeling we're going to end up breaking this off into its own episode, and the people listening to this won't be surprised by that. But I was, as an adult, I think it was one of those cable stations where they do like the 25 days of Christmas. So they've got all this time to fill out, and they showed a lot of these old Rankin Bass films, and I sat there and I TiVoed a bunch of them just a couple years ago, just because I hadn't seen some of them in a while. And I was surprised, starting with Rudolph, and then you get into Frosty the Snowman is probably the second most popular one. I've got the note here that was in 1969. So that would have been a few years later. And then you've got Santa Claus is Coming to Town in 1970. There were several.
That was one of my, I will say that was my second favorite. So you've named my top three favorite.
Yeah.
But it went Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and Frosty the Snowman are my top three of that.
Yeah. And I'll say this, not that it matters. This maybe you would agree with me, maybe you don't. But when I think about, like, if Santa Claus had an origin story, to me, that is like his official story. I mean, to me, it just is.
Right.
It seems legitimate enough, and there are several versions of how he that are out there. But to me, that became his official origin. And then what got me was when you get into later ones, like The Year Without a Santa Claus in 1974, how that almost has like and I would count Santa Claus is Coming to Town before it. They're almost like epic fantasies. They start to there's this world building going on that was very surprising to watch as an adult, to where they would acknowledge things that happened in the previous installments and then build upon those ideas. And then, there was just so much going on that made it obvious that there were people working there that thought of these as more than just one-off specials. They were trying to kind of almost create an inner universe that had connectivity to it. And I know you're a big fan of that sort of thing, but it seemed like such an unlikely place to see something like that happening. And I don't know if you would agree with that assessment or not.
Yeah. You know, just to be honest with you, when it came to the differences between the first three that we talked about and then the others, I watched them because they were on.
Yeah, well, I can see that.
But I enjoyed them. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy them, but they did. Those top three that I had, those were the ones. Those were the ones that.
Those were the big ones for sure.
Yeah, those are the big ones. And then, you know, it was fun to watch the others, but didn't really have the same feels for me.
No, and that's there definitely there was a shift. I think there's a reason that Rudolph holds up above the others, because once you start getting into stuff like Rudolph's Shiny New Year, that one is just so ridiculous from the get-go. But I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that over about a 15-year span of time when they were making these specials, it's interesting to at least go through once and see how they're connecting all the dots to try and make it something that holds together a little bit more. And there's a little more effort there than you would expect for a what should have been a series of one-off Christmas specials. And I take my hat off to it. I mean, it didn't 100% succeed, and it probably could have done better, but then again, I just would not have even expected the attempt. And I thought they do a decent job for what they were doing. And again, especially since most of these were stop motion programming, which to me it can be so inhibiting and time consuming. The fact that they were even able to get one out every couple of years is pretty impressive. So,
well, at least it was back then. I mean, now they can do it relatively easy, as we know by the Robot Chicken, which
right.
Takes out every week. It's like that is not. It was very impressive back then. Not so much now. Now,
I think they use computers.
Now you and I could do it on our home computer, pretty much.
Pretty much, yes. Yes, this was no computer access back then. So, I guess my point on all that is, there's more to mine out of those specials than I expected, especially watching them as a kid. And then they cap off with the Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July, which I think was the last of the run, and that one tried to be like this epic 2-hour big boss fight, as I recall. It was a lot of fun for what it was, but definitely the ideas were pretty milked out by then. But there are 3 or 4 in here that I still sincerely enjoy as an adult and think are worth revisiting.
Well, I think The Year Without Santa Claus, I will say this much about that particular one. As a child, I enjoyed the Heat Miser and the Snow Miser. I thought that the little singing and dancing little routine was very catchy.
That's fun.
And then, of course, their Mother Nature. I thought that was about the coolest thing about the whole whole program.
That's enough. Yeah,
right. I was like, and honestly, that's all I remember about it. I don't even remember why Santa Claus wasn't, I don't, only thing I remember, I'm he's Mr. Heat Miser. I mean, that was it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, he was upset because people weren't believing him anymore, John.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
People were too cynical. They were going on with their lives, and they couldn't take time to appreciate what Santa was doing. Anyway, yeah, I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
I just, since we're talking about Rudolph anyway, I want to just take a moment and acknowledge that, that those folks that worked on those specials probably put a lot of time and effort into creating something that kids and adults are still looking back and appreciating to one extent or another. And I just want to take my hat off to that, because it was a different time. It was a lot harder to make an hour of television, especially the way they went about it. And I have a lot of appreciation for what they were doing, and they weren't 100% successful, but for what it was, I think it's worth saying that at Christmas time they're a lot of fun to kind of just watch, and they just make me feel a little warmer, I guess. So,
well, I will say this much about Rudolph. So Rudolph was directly responsible for me finding out what real reindeer look like, because as a child you see Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and you see all the deer, Comet, Donner, Blitzen, all of them. They look like deer that we have here in Indiana, just like, regular deer, like Bambi, right? And so I remember I saw something on TV and I saw this creature and they said it was a reindeer. And I remember I don't know if it was my grandmother or my mother. I said, that doesn't look like Rudolph. That looks like a moose. And I mean, and so they were like, no, well, reindeer actually look different than, the deer that we see, like if you're, out in the woods here in Indiana. And I said, well, why didn't they make them look like real reindeer? And it was because they couldn't make them cute, because reindeer aren't really cute.
Yeah.
I've seen uglier animals for sure, by far. Don't get me wrong, but reindeer they don't lend themselves to be cute like regular Bambi deers and stuff. So
right. I hear you. Well, there you go.
That was funny.
little bit of trivia about John I didn't know. Well, very cool. Well, that's this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this. I don't know. It's probably not going to be. I'm sure my choices are not the most shocking or revelatory, but they're the ones I love and they make me happy, and I guess that's all that matters. But you've given me some new ones to look into, and maybe I can find some of those to stream and check out. And but thanks for taking this time and going through our list with me.
Most definitely. It was a lot of fun. It was something we were both looking forward to, and hopefully we'll give our listeners something to brighten their holidays and whatnot. So definitely had a good time here.
And once again, happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wanted to take this time to let our listeners know that we are once again having our show broadcast on our own personal YouTube channel. We had some changes go on, and we are back on our YouTube channel. So you want to catch the shows on our YouTube channel and not Nerddom United. Just keep that in mind when you're looking for us on the YouTube. As always, I would like to thank our viewers and listeners, because they are why we do this. They're what keeps us going. We owe it all to you guys. We enjoy what we do, and we hope that we give you something out of this that's special.
Also, because we're going to get filthy rich from it too, as you know. So I mean,
keep it quiet. Keep it
Oh,
quiet.
I forgot. Sorry. Yeah,
But
that's our plot. Sorry about that.
right, that's our
Truth is out there.
in the brain moment there to try and take over the world.
That's right.
But thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you. If you're wanting to know what's going on with me, you can visit my website at johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they find you, RJ?
rjsullivanfiction.com, where I am at the end of releasing all of my old titles that went down about 6 months ago. So you can actually go and shop for some stuff for a change. So any support would be greatly appreciated. Just go in there and check it out. It's all laid out for you.
Sounds good. And I'll have some announcements as far as my writing is concerned after the first of the year. There's some things that, I've been sitting on that are coming to be. So a little bit more time is needed, but I'd say by the beginning of spring, there'll be some definite announcements being made that will be worth the wait.
All right. Well, I think this is our last episode before the new year. So
yes,
I'm so excited to say goodbye to 2020 and hello to 2021. Yeah. May it be better.
Amen. Definitely. I'm so over 2020. I mean, I've never wanted a year to end so fervently as I have this year. And I mean, I'm not even worried about the passage of time. I'm like, oh yeah, take the next 30 days off of my life just so we can get to the next year. It's just like, it's been a rough year for everyone and we've all been dealing with a lot. And, I pray that everyone has a better year in 2021 and that, you stay safe and, you realize what's important. It's not politics. It's not, anger and misunderstanding. It's about trying to get through life and being the best you can be and respecting everyone and being the best person that you can be and treating others with respect. I think that should be, the golden rule should definitely be applied coming out of this year, going into, years ahead. So.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll take this opportunity to sign off and wish every one of our listeners a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah if you celebrate, and Happy New Year's and Happy Kwanzaa. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. And until next time, bye.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.